My son didn't ask me to look after his children. He gave me an order. That's exactly how it happened. That's how David, my only son, looked me in the eye and without a flicker of hesitation, sealed not just my destiny, but his own too. I remember that morning so clearly. The sun was just starting to warm the porch, painting the old wooden planks with a soft, familiar glow. I had just finished my tea, thinking about what flowers I'd plant that spring. Then their car pulled up, kicking up a little dust on the gravel path. It wasn't a Sunday. That was the first sign. David usually brought the grandchildren on Sundays, for lunch, for a visit that always filled my quiet house with laughter. But this was a Tuesday, a weekday, and his car was packed. Suitcases piled high in the back seat, even strapped to the roof rack. And there they were, David and his wife, Sarah, standing on my doorstep. Their faces, usually so quick to smile, were different. There was a hard glint in their eyes, a kind of cold certainty that made my stomach clench. "Mom," David said, and his voice wasn't warm. It was clipped, precise. "We're going to Miami." Miami. The word hung in the air, a distant, shimmering mirage. I knew they'd been talking about opportunities abroad, whispering about a new life. But it always felt like some far-off dream, not something real, not something that would touch my life. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Sarah. She just offered a quick, almost imperceptible nod, her gaze already drifting past me, towards the house. And David gestured to Liam and Chloe, my two grandchildren, who stood by the car, little backpacks clutched tight. They looked so small, so confused. Their eyes, usually bright with the promise of a day at Grandma's, were wide and a little glassy. "You'll stay with the children," he said. It wasn't a question. There was no please, no would you mind, just a statement, a decree. I was the convenient depository for lives they were simply discarding. I felt a chill. Despite the morning sun, it was an emotional coldness seeping into my bones. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My throat felt dry, tight. I wanted to ask, why now? Why like this? What about them? But his gaze was already moving, checking the car. Sarah gave me a forced, almost plastic smile. "They'll be fine with you," she chirped, a strange, hollow sound, as if their well-being was a given, an easy thing, without any thought to the suddenness, the brutal abandonment. Liam and Chloe stood there, silently, watching their parents. They didn't run to me, didn't hug their parents goodbye. It was like they sensed the unspoken agreement, the deep, uncomfortable distance that had suddenly opened up. My heart ached for them, for their innocence caught in this selfish storm. Then David slammed the car door shut. The sound was harsh, final. It echoed in the quiet morning air, a sharp crack that vibrated through my chest. It felt like a coffin lid closing, not on a person, but on the life I knew. The quiet, peaceful routine I had built, the comfortable rhythm of my widowhood, all of it was instantly sealed away, gone. They looked at me, just for a moment, before getting in the car. It wasn't a look of gratitude or even apology. It was the certainty of someone getting rid of a problem. They thought they were leaving me with a burden, a heavy responsibility. They believed that, at my age, I would simply have no choice but to accept it, to nod silently as I always had, to put their needs first, just like I always had, to quietly manage their lives while they went off to live their American dream, free and unburdened. What they didn't know, what they had completely forgotten in their blind ambition, was something much deeper. This old house, the one they were abandoning me and my grandchildren in, held a secret. A secret my late husband, a man far wiser than David, had left behind. He had protected me, quietly, carefully, for a day he perhaps foresaw. Little did my son know, as he started the engine, that his selfish, heartless order had just handed me something profound. It had given me the very power I needed, the power to sign the end of everything he thought was his by right. The engine rumbled, the car pulled away, and I stood on my porch, my two small grandchildren looking up at me, their eyes filled with tears, questions, and a silent, raw pain. And I knew, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that nothing would ever be the same. The silence that followed their departure wasn't empty. My heart was breaking for them, but a cold, clear thought cut through my pain. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about them. In that overwhelming moment, as the morning sun warmed my face but couldn't thaw the ice in my chest, my mind drifted back, almost automatically. I found myself thinking about who I was, who I had always been, in this house, in this life. My name is Evelyn. I'm 74 years old, and I've been a widow for almost a decade now. It feels like a lifetime and yesterday all at once. For 50 years, this house, these walls, this garden have been my whole world. I came here as a young bride, full of dreams, and I watched them grow and change, just like the trees outside my kitchen window. It's where I raised David, my only son. Every scraped knee, every first word, every school project. It all happened right here. I remember those years, full of purpose. To help with expenses, I used to sew for other people. Clothes, curtains, little repairs. My sewing machine hummed day after day in the spare room. And my garden, that was always my pride and joy. I'd spend hours out there coaxing life from the soil, watching colors bloom. My hands, now a little gnarled with age, used to be stained with rich earth. My life was simple. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. It was nurtured by the everyday affection of my grandchildren, Liam and Chloe, those two lights in my life, and by the quiet routine of an elderly woman who has seen much in this life, learned a thing or two, and mostly just wanted to live out her days in peace, surrounded by the familiar. I lived on my modest pension, the one I earned after all those years working part-time jobs and raising my son. It was enough. I never lacked anything. On the contrary, whenever David needed help, a little extra cash, or a loan to get by, I provided it. I always did. I truly believed I was investing in my family's future, in my son's happiness. My son, David, my only child. I thought that's what mothers did. You give your children everything you can, hoping they'll build a good life. He would visit me on Sundays without fail, or so it seemed back then. He'd bring Liam and Chloe, and my heart would just swell with joy. The house would fill with life, with their innocent laughter, with the sound of little feet running down the hallway. On those Sundays, I would feel like the happiest grandmother in the world. cooking their favorite meals, reading stories, watching them play in the garden. Those were the days I truly lived for. What David never valued, what he completely dismissed in his own pursuit of more, was that my late husband, Arthur, was a wise and careful man. He left everything securely tied up before he passed. He always used to tell me, a gentle hand on my shoulder, looking around our small living room, "Evelyn, this house is your kingdom. The deed is solely in your name, so that no one ever can take your ground from beneath you." I kept those words as a loving memory, a comfort, a testament to his protection. I never, not once, imagined that one day they would literally become my fortress. I never thought I'd need such a shield against my own flesh and blood. For so long, everything just was. Life had a rhythm, a predictable, comforting pulse. But then, almost imperceptibly, everything began to change, and I, in my quiet little world, was too slow to see the storm gathering on the horizon. The shift wasn't a sudden crack, but more like a slow, steady erosion. It started so small, I barely noticed it at first. Those cherished Sunday visits, they began to dwindle. At first, it was just once, then twice, that David, my son, would call, his voice apologetic, saying they couldn't make it. "Too busy, Mom," or "something came up." Simple excuses, easily accepted at first. Because life gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it? But then, the visits that did happen felt different. Shorter, rushed, like they were ticking a box instead of truly wanting to be here. David and Sarah, my daughter-in-law, were always on their phones. Always. Their faces would be glued to the screens, their thumbs flying across the keys. And when they spoke, it was often in hushed tones, almost whispers. They'd excuse themselves, go into the kitchen, or step out onto the porch, talking about opportunities abroad or a real life. The words floated in the air, disjointed, like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't put together. They'd glance at me, then back at each other, as if I wouldn't understand, as if I was too old or too simple to grasp their grand plans. I felt a coldness in the air, a distance growing between us that was far more painful than any harsh word could have been. A silence that hummed with unspoken things. It wasn't just a feeling either. The children, Liam and Chloe, my sweet grandchildren, seemed to feel it too. They became quieter when their parents were around, less prone to their usual boisterous play. Their laughter, usually so free and bright, would dim, almost as if they were afraid to make too much noise, afraid to disturb the fragile peace their parents seemed to demand. They'd stick closer to me, their little hands often finding mine as if for reassurance. I tried to ask, of course. I'm their mother, their grandmother. I worried. "What's happening?" I'd ask David, trying to keep my voice light, casual, hoping he'd open up. But the answer was always vague, evasive. "Oh, you wouldn't understand, Mom. These are things about our future. Big plans. Their future." It always came back to that, and it became clearer with every vague explanation, with every hushed conversation I wasn't meant to hear, that Their future seemed not to include me. Not in the way I always imagined, anyway. Then the requests for money started. First, it was small amounts, a few hundred here, a few hundred there, to speed up the process for their big move, their big plans. Then the sums grew larger. Thousands. They'd say it was for visa fees, or document processing, or initial investment opportunities. My savings, built up carefully over a lifetime, slowly started to dwindle. I remember the knot that would form in my stomach each time I went to the bank, each time I saw the numbers on my statement shrink. But I silenced that fear. I told myself I was investing in their happiness, in my son's happiness, and in the future of my grandchildren. I truly believed it was for everyone's good, that this was my way of helping them achieve their dreams, and that one day we'd all be together again, happier for it. With every broken promise of a family lunch that never materialized, with every unanswered call I made just to check in, to hear their voices, that knot in my throat tightened. It was a physical sensation, a painful constriction that made it hard to swallow. It felt like watching a ship slowly, agonizingly slowly, drift away on the horizon. A beautiful vessel, carrying the people I loved most in the world, moving further and further into the distance, towards a place I couldn't reach them. My heart ached, a dull, constant throb of fear and loneliness. I told myself they'd come back, that this was just a phase, that they'd remember me, remember us, and come home. But deep down, a colder, more insistent whisper began to form. Like what I still didn't know, what my loving, hopeful heart desperately tried to deny, was that they weren't just drifting away. They weren't just charting a new course. They were planning something much more deliberate. They were planning to leave me behind, and not just me. I told myself they'd come back, that this was just a phase, that they'd remember me, remember us, and come home. But deep down, a colder, more insistent whisper began to form. A terrible suspicion. What I still didn't know, what my loving, hopeful heart desperately tried to deny, was that they weren't just drifting away. They weren't just charting a new course. They were planning something much more deliberate. They were planning to leave me behind, and not just me. The day arrived without warning. It was a Tuesday, just like any other, or so I thought. I was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea, when I saw David's car pull up in front of the house. My heart gave a little jump, a mix of surprise and a flicker of hope. Maybe they were just stopping by, a quick visit. But then I saw the luggage, piled high, spilling out of the trunk, even strapped to the roof. My hands, holding the teapot, started to tremble. David and Sarah got out. Their faces were set, hard. There was no warmth, no apology in their eyes, just a cold determination. Liam and Chloe, my two little grandchildren, got out too, slowly, like automatons. They each clutched a small backpack, looking around, confused. Their little faces were pale, their eyes wide with uncertainty. "Mom," David said, and his voice was flat, emotionless. We're moving to Miami. He didn't look at me, but at the house, as if measuring it. The opportunity came up, and we can't miss it. He paused, and my breath caught in my throat. You stay with the children. We'll figure things out later. My mind reeled. Stay with the children. Figure things out later? His voice was firm, completely devoid of any question or softness. There was no room for discussion. It wasn't a plea for help, a request. It was a notice, a brutal, direct notice of abandonment. He wasn't asking me. He was telling me, ordering me. I stood paralyzed on the porch. My feet felt rooted to the wood, unable to move, unable to respond. I just watched. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I thought I knew, walked around the car, putting the last suitcases in. He didn't even look at his own children. Not once. Liam and Chloe stood quietly beside me, small figures in their confusion, their shoulders starting to shake with quiet sobs. They didn't run to him, didn't try to say goodbye. It was like they knew, instinctively, that there was no point. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, came up to me. She gave me a forced smile, a thin, almost plastic stretch of her lips. They'll be fine with you, she chirped, her voice light, as if this was a perfectly normal, easy arrangement, as if leaving two small children was no more complicated than dropping off a parcel. Then she turned, slid into the passenger seat, and closed the door. I felt a scream building in my throat, a primal, guttural sound that tore through me. David. I managed to choke out his name, my voice raw, broken, but he was already in the driver's seat. He didn't look back, didn't wave, didn't acknowledge me or his children. The engine roared, and the car sped off, gravel spitting from beneath the tires. I stood there, on the porch of my own home, the morning sun still warm on my face, but I felt nothing but ice. Two small children, my grandchildren, clung to me, their silent tears soaking into my dress. They were crying for parents who had just discarded them, who had driven away without a backward glance, without a single word of comfort. In that moment, standing there, holding Liam and Chloe, the humiliation was the greatest pain I had ever felt. It was a deep, searing ache that went beyond sadness. It felt like I had been stripped bare, exposed for the fool I was. I was no longer the beloved mother, the cherished grandmother. I was just an obstacle, something to be circumvented, a convenient solution to a problem they had created for themselves. I was useful, but not loved. I was a means to an end. The sound of the car disappearing around the corner was not just the fading hum of an engine. It was the sound of my trust, my lifelong trust in my son, shattering into 1,000 pieces. It was the sound of every loving memory, every sacrifice, every ounce of faith I had poured into him, crashing down around me. And as the silence settled, heavy and suffocating, I knew that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The silence settled, heavy and suffocating, and I knew that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. That first night after they left, it truly was a nightmare. It was the presence of Liam and Chloe, two small children, suddenly thrust into my care, their world upside down. Liam, my sweet Liam, he cried. Not loud, angry cries, but soft, heart-wrenching whimpers of longing. He kept whispering for his dad, for his mom, twisting the corner of his little blanket, his eyes wide and red-rimmed. Chloe, my little Chloe, she was quieter, but her grief was just as deep. She just kept calling for her mother, a soft, desperate sound, over and over, until her voice faded into sniffles and exhaustion. My heart, already raw from David's betrayal, was truly in pieces. Every tear they shed felt like a knife twisting inside me, and beneath the crushing pain, a slow, hot rage began to burn, a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Not really, not about my own son, but there it was, blazing. I thought about calling David, screaming at him, begging him to come back to see what he had done, what he had left behind. I could have. I had his number. I knew where they were heading. But something held me back. Something deeper. I looked at those two frightened little faces, illuminated by the dim nightlight, their small hands clutching mine, their trusting eyes looking up at me, their grandma, the only stable thing left in their suddenly chaotic world. And in that moment, something inside me shifted drastically. The overwhelming pain, the personal humiliation, it all began to give way, not to resignation, but to a cold, hard fury. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was like a thick fog had lifted, revealing a path I never knew I had to walk. My mission, I realized with a sudden, startling certainty, was no longer to lament. It wasn't about my hurt feelings, my shattered trust, or my abandoned dreams. It was about protecting these two innocent children. They were helpless. They had been discarded. And I, their grandmother, was now their only anchor, their only hope. I didn't call David. I didn't reach for the phone. Instead, in the dead of night, when the house was finally silent, except for the soft breathing of the children sleeping fitfully in the next room, I got up. My joints ached, as they always do, but there was a new energy in my movements, a purpose. I walked quietly to the old wooden dresser in my bedroom. It's been there for as long as I can remember, a solid piece of furniture that has seen generations pass through this house. I opened the bottom drawer. It usually held old photo albums and keepsakes, but tucked beneath a stack of yellowed lace doilies, there was a worn brown folder, the one with all the important documents. My fingers, steady despite the tremor in my soul, reached for it. I pulled it out, placed it gently on the top of the dresser, and opened it. And there it was, the house deed, the actual official document. I ran my fingers over the heavy paper, feeling the faint indentations of the typewriter ink. I didn't need to read it again, but I did. My name, Evelyn Reed, clear as day. Sole and legitimate owner. Not David's name, not his inheritance, as he so carelessly assumed it would be. My late husband, Arthur's voice, his calm, protective words, echoed in my mind. So clear, so present, as if he were right there beside me. He had prepared for a day I never imagined would come. A day when I would need this fortress, not against strangers, but against my own blood. In that very moment, standing in the quiet of my bedroom, the moonlight streaming through the window. I decided what I would do. This wasn't about revenge. No, that felt too petty, too small for the depth of what I felt. This was about justice, about putting things right. They had underestimated me, thought my age, my quiet life, my unconditional love made me weak. They thought I would simply crumble, that I had no choice but to accept their selfish dictates. I looked at the deed again, then back at the door that led to the children's room. I gently, carefully, put the deed back into the folder, not with the trembling hands of a victim, lost and confused. No, my hands were firm, resolute. The hands of a guardian. The game, as David might have called his ambitious venture, had just begun. But the rules? Oh, the rules were suddenly, powerfully mine. I would play by my own rules now, for the sake of those I loved most, and they wouldn't see it coming. The game had just begun, I thought, placing the deed back in its folder. The rules were suddenly mine, but they wouldn't see it coming. The following weeks after David and Sarah left were filled with a strange, heavy silence. A silence broken only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the old house, and the new, precious sounds of Liam and Chloe. Their whispers, their little footsteps, their developing laughter. I spent my days learning their new routines, trying to fill the gaping hole their parents had left behind. Every minute was focused on them, on making them feel safe and loved, trying to mend their small, fragile hearts. Then the phone rang. My heart jumped a little, a mix of dread and a faint, foolish hope. I looked at the caller ID. It was David, my son. I took a deep breath, clutching the receiver. He didn't ask how the children were. Not a single word about Liam or Chloe, or how they were adjusting. He didn't ask how I was. Not a word about me. He went straight to the point. His voice devoid of any warmth, purely transactional. "Mom," he began, as if we were discussing a business deal, not the lives of his children. "I need money. Things here are more expensive than we thought. I'm going to have a real estate agent appraise the house. With the sale amount, we'll get settled here, get the big house we want, and then send for the children." He spoke of my house, my home for 50 years, the house Arthur had protected for me. He spoke of it as if it were already his, as if it was a pile of bricks and mortar, a mere commodity to be liquidated to fund his new life. And he spoke of Liam and Chloe, my precious grandchildren, as if they were luggage to be sent for later, once his own comfort was secured. The coldness of his words sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing the quiet strength of the deed, safe in its drawer. When I opened them, I looked out the window at Liam and Chloe playing in the garden, their small figures bathed in the afternoon sun. My voice, when it came, was calm, far calmer than I felt. "David," I said, and the name felt like a stranger's on my tongue. "I'm not going to sell the house." On the other end of the line, there was silence. A long, stunned silence. For a moment, I thought he hadn't heard me. Then, the silence was shattered. An explosion of pure rage. It wasn't the petulant anger of a child, but the furious roar of a man denied something he believed was his by right. "What do you mean you're not selling?" His voice was booming, distorted through the phone, full of incredulity and betrayal. "This house is my inheritance. It's what Dad always said. You're being selfish. You want to ruin my future? You want to keep me from my dreams?" The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. Selfish. Me. After everything I had given him, everything I had done, after all the money I had sent, after taking in his children without a second thought. But I held firm. My grip on the phone tightened. My silence was my answer. I would not engage. I would not beg. He started calling other relatives then. I found out later. My sister, my brother, cousins, even old friends of the family. He was telling his version of the story. The poor, struggling son, denied his rightful inheritance by his bitter, uncooperative mother. Spreading poison, twisting the truth, painting me as the villain. The calls started coming in. First, a cousin who sounded embarrassed, trying to mediate. Then, my sister-in-law, Arthur's sister, called me directly. Her voice was sharp, condemning. She told me I was a bitter old woman, that I was stubborn and set in my ways, that I was hindering my own son's happiness, holding him back, ruining his one chance at a good life. She even implied I was doing it out of spite, for some imagined slight. I found myself completely alone, judged by everyone, the people I thought I could count on, the family I had always supported, were now turning their backs on me, believing David's lies. The pain of that loneliness, the feeling of being utterly isolated, was immense. It was a cold ache that settled deep in my bones. But every time that pain threatened to overwhelm me, every time the accusations echoed in my head, I would look at Liam and Chloe, their innocent faces, their trust in me, and I knew with every fiber of my being that I was doing the right thing. Their future, their protection, that was all that mattered. Then, one sunny morning, the doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the quiet of the house. I opened the door. It was David, my son, and he wasn't alone. He had brought a man with him, dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase. A lawyer. David's expression was hard, triumphant, the face of someone who had come for war. He didn't wait for me to invite them in. "Mom," he said, his voice loud, carrying across the porch, "for anyone who might be listening on the street, since you won't cooperate, we're going to solve this another way. The law is on my side. This house is a family asset, and I am the sole heir." He spoke loudly on the porch for anyone who wanted to hear. The same porch where, just weeks before, he had abandoned me with his children. And I stood there, watching him, my heart a tight knot in my chest. He truly believed he had won. He spoke loudly on the porch for anyone who wanted to hear. The same porch where, just weeks before, he had abandoned me with his children. And I stood there, watching him, my heart a tight knot in my chest. He truly believed he had won. I stood in the doorway, my hand still resting lightly on the frame, the sunlight warm on my face. David, my son, had brought a lawyer with him, a tall, impeccably dressed man holding a sleek black briefcase. David's face was set, triumphant. Like a general arriving at a conquered city, He didn't wait for an invitation to enter. He just launched into his speech, his voice loud, formal, meant to carry. "Mom," he said again, almost spitting the word, his tone completely devoid of any affection. "Since you won't cooperate, since you're being so unreasonable, we're going to solve this another way." He gestured to the lawyer. "The law is on my side. This house is a family asset, and I am the sole heir." The lawyer stepped forward then, a well-rehearsed sigh escaping his lips. He began to speak, his voice smooth and practiced, citing articles and laws. He talked about family property, about inheritance rights, about my age and how it might affect my capacity to manage assets. He used big, confusing words, legal jargon, trying to make me feel small, ignorant, overwhelmed. David stood beside him, a smug expression on his face, nodding along, convinced that this formal display of legal power would simply make me surrender. I let them speak. I let the lawyer drone on about my lack of foresight, about David's rightful claim. I listened to every word, every accusation, every thinly veiled threat. My mind was clear, my resolve unshaken. All those weeks of silent tears, of lonely nights, of the crushing weight of their betrayal, had hardened something inside me. They thought they were cornering an old woman, frail and easily intimidated. They thought my love for David, my son, would make me crumble. When they finally finished, the lawyer snapping his briefcase shut with a crisp click, a silence fell, a heavy, expectant silence. David looked at me, a challenge in his eyes, waiting for me to break. I took a deep breath. "May I have just a minute?" I asked, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. My voice didn't waver. David frowned, surprised by my composure, but nodded dismissively, as if granting a small, final courtesy before the inevitable. I turned and walked back into the house. The children were playing quietly in the living room, building a tower of blocks. Liam looked up at me, his eyes wide, sensing the tension. I gave him a small, reassuring smile. My focus was on them, always on them. I walked to my bedroom, to the old wooden dresser. My hand went straight to the bottom drawer. I pulled out the worn brown folder, the one with Arthur's careful handwriting on the tab, the one containing the proof of his foresight, his protection. I held it tightly, feeling the weight of it, the power it contained. Not the power of money or brute force, but the quiet, undeniable power of truth. I walked back out onto the porch. David and the lawyer were still standing there, their expressions a mix of impatience and condescension. I walked directly up to the lawyer, bypassing David entirely. With steady hands, I pulled out the yellowed deed, folded neatly inside the folder. It felt surprisingly heavy in my palm. I held it out to him. "Please," I said, my voice clear and firm. "Read aloud the name of the registered owner on this document." The lawyer took the paper from me, his eyebrows raised in mild surprise. He unfolded the brittle old parchment, adjusted his glasses, and his eyes scanned the document. His professional demeanor, so polished moments before, seemed to falter. He paused, reread it, then looked up at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Disbelief. Then he looked at David. Finally, he cleared his throat. He read, his voice much quieter than before. Owner, Evelyn Reed. The words hung in the air. A sudden, cold shock seemed to ripple through David. His smug expression vanished. His face, usually so ruddy, went pale, a sickly white. His eyes darted from the lawyer to the deed, then to me, a look of pure, unadulterated shock. "It can't be," he stammered, his voice thin, almost a whisper. "Dad," he said. I interrupted him, not with anger. No. There was no triumph in my voice, only a deep, aching sadness, a profound disappointment for the man my son had become. "Your father," I said, looking straight into his pale, bewildered eyes, "protected me from people like the man you've become. He knew what he was doing." I took a step closer, my voice gaining a quiet, formidable strength. My gaze swept past David, to the house, to the memories, to the lives of the children inside. "And now," I continued, my voice firm with purpose, "I will use that protection to care for the innocents you left behind." I paused, letting my words sink in. David was speechless, staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. The lawyer looked equally stunned, his eyes flitting between us. "Just yesterday," I said, my voice resonating with a quiet authority that surprised even myself, "I went to the registry office. With a single signature, I created a trust fund in Liam and Chloe's names. This house, along with all my savings, now guarantees their future, their education, their health, their security. It's all theirs." My gaze returned to David, unwavering. And then I delivered the final, painful truth. A truth that was not revenge, but simply the stark reality of his choices. "For you, David," I said, my voice quiet, but piercing through the silence, "nothing was left." He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, utterly defeated. The man who had walked onto my porch with such arrogance, believing he held all the cards, was now stripped bare. His grand plans, his American dream, had just crumbled, and the silence that followed was deafening. "For you, David, nothing was left." He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, utterly defeated. The man who had walked onto my porch with such arrogance, believing he held all the cards, was now stripped bare. His grand plans, his American dream, had just crumbled, and the silence that followed was deafening. He turned slowly, almost mechanically, and walked away with the lawyer, not once looking back at the house, or at me, or at the children he had left behind. My life didn't turn into a fairy tale after that day. Let's be honest, raising two energetic children at 74 years old is a daily challenge, pure and simple. There are mornings my back aches so much I feel like an old tree swaying in the wind. My patience, I'll admit, is sometimes shorter than it used to be, especially after a long day of school pickups and homework battles. And fatigue, well, fatigue has become my constant companion. There are nights I fall into bed completely exhausted, wondering how I'll do it again. But then I hear them, the house, which for so long echoed with the silence of my loneliness, now has the bright, sweet sound of laughter. I hear Liam and Chloe running in the hallway, their feet thudding softly on the old wooden floors, chasing each other, their giggles filling every room. I hear their endless questions, the curious chatter of children discovering the world. The silence of loneliness has been replaced by the sweet, beautiful chaos of love, and it's a trade I would make 1,000,000 times over. With the resources I protected, the money David thought was his inheritance, I was able to do what was right. I enrolled Liam and Chloe in a good school nearby, a place with caring teachers and bright classrooms. It's a comfort to know they are learning, growing, and have a chance at a real future, something their parents seemed intent on denying them. I could buy them the new books they needed, the proper school supplies, and any medicines or clothes they outgrew in a blink. It's filled with school drop-offs in the mornings, the quick goodbyes, and the joyful reunions at pickup time. We come home and it's time for homework, sitting at the old kitchen table, my head bent over their books, trying to remember my fractions and grammar rules. Then dinner, baths, and the best part of the day, telling stories before bed. Their little faces rapt with attention, listening to tales of my own childhood or the adventures I invent on the spot. It's a busy life, but it's a life that matters. I even found a new community. At the school gate, waiting for the children, I started talking to other grandmothers, and some of the younger mothers too. We share stories, complaints about homework, and tips for dealing with scraped knees. They're people who understand my struggle, who offer me a supportive smile or a knowing nod. It's a small thing, but it's a connection I never knew I needed. I'm not as alone as I thought I was. I am neither rich nor powerful. I am just Evelyn, a grandmother, a woman who, when faced with an impossible situation, did what needed to be done. I had to protect my grandchildren, and in doing so, I protected myself. David never contacted me again, not after that day. The phone stayed silent where his number used to appear. In a way, I lost a son. The David I knew, the one I loved, truly disappeared that day on the porch. But I gained something immeasurable. I gained the chance to give my grandchildren a dignified future, a childhood filled with love and security. And in taking on that challenge, in fighting for them, I rediscovered a purpose for my own life, a quiet, deep purpose that makes every ache, every moment of fatigue worth it. And that peace, the peace of knowing I did right by them, by my Arthur and by myself, no amount of money could ever buy. I often look out at my garden these days. It still thrives, perhaps even more so now. Liam sometimes helps me, his small hands carefully digging in the soil, planting flowers that will soon bloom. And Chloe, she runs through the green grass, chasing butterflies, her laughter light and free, a sound that fills my world. I often look out at my garden these days. It still thrives, perhaps even more so now. Liam sometimes helps me, his small hands carefully digging in the soil, planting flowers that will soon bloom. And Chloe, she runs through the green grass, chasing butterflies, her laughter light and free, a sound that fills my world. That peace, the peace of knowing I did right by them, by my Arthur, and by myself, no amount of money could ever buy. looking at them, watching them grow. I often think about how life puts us at crossroads we never imagined. You spend your whole life planning, building, loving, and then one day, everything you thought was solid just crumbles. And sometimes the people we love the most, the ones we sacrificed for, the ones we gave our very hearts to, they are the ones who force us to find a strength we didn't even know we possessed. They count on our unconditional love, our natural kindness to make fools of us, to use us. They see our big open hearts as a weakness, a door to walk through without knocking, without a thought for who they might be trampling. I think of all those years, all the meals cooked, the clothes mended, the sleepless nights. All the times I put David's needs, David's happiness, before my own. I gave and gave and gave, because that's what mothers do. That's what love is, isn't it? Selfless. And then, when I was at my most vulnerable, when I thought I was finally able to rest and enjoy my golden years, he looked at me, his mother, and saw only a convenience, a problem solver, a useful, disposable object. He thought I was just an old piece of furniture in the house. Something useful, yes, something familiar, but without a voice, without my own will, certainly without any say in my own destiny or his. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many other women, how many other elderly people like me are out there feeling this very same thing. People who dedicated their entire lives to caring for others, to raising families, to supporting partners, to building homes. They poured their love, their energy, their very being into nurturing everyone around them. And then in their old age, when they should be respected, cherished, and enjoying the fruits of their labor, they are often treated as if their value has simply expired, as if they're no longer relevant, as if their wisdom, their experience, their very presence is nothing more than a burden, their opinions dismissed, their needs ignored, their kindness mistaken for weakness. It's a cruel twist, isn't it? To be cast aside by the very ones you built your world for. To be seen as invisible by someone who should have seen you first, seen you clearest. I've lived a long life, seen many things, and I can tell you, there's a quiet epidemic of loneliness and disregard for the elderly. We are not just our wrinkles and our aches. We are not just our past. We are still here. We still have dreams, feelings, a desire to matter. We are still human beings, deserving of dignity and respect, just like anyone else. My journey through this has been painful, yes. The betrayal cut deep, but it also stripped away the illusions. It forced me to stand up not just for myself, but for Liam and Chloe. It showed me that true strength isn't about physical power or wealth or even the loudest voice. It's about protecting what's right. It's about recognizing your own worth, even when others try to diminish it. It's about holding on to your dignity no matter what. And you? Have you ever been treated as if you were invisible by someone who should have seen you first? Have you ever felt that your kindness was mistaken for weakness? Maybe it was a family member, a friend, or even a system that just didn't see you as a person. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I've learned that sometimes those moments of being underestimated, of being discarded, can be the very catalysts that ignite a fire within you. A fire you never knew you had. A fire to reclaim your life, to stand in your truth, and to protect the innocent. This house, this garden, these children, they are my truth now, and I will protect it all with every fiber of my being. I've learned that love, real love, sometimes means drawing a line, a firm, clear line. I often look out at my garden these days. It still thrives, perhaps even more so now. Liam sometimes helps me, his small hands carefully digging in the soil, planting flowers that will soon bloom. And Chloe, she runs through the green grass, chasing butterflies, her laughter light and free, a sound that fills my world. That peace, the peace of knowing I did right by them, by my Arthur and by myself, no amount of money could ever buy. Looking at them, watching them grow, I often think about how life puts us at crossroads we never imagined. Who would have thought, at 74, I'd be starting a whole new chapter, a chapter born out of such deep pain? You spend your whole life planning, building, loving, and then one day, everything you thought was solid just crumbles. And sometimes the people we love the most, the ones we sacrificed for, the ones we gave our very hearts to, they are the ones who force us to find a strength we didn't even know we possessed. They count on our unconditional love, our natural kindness, to make fools of us, to use us. They see our big, open hearts as a weakness, a door to walk through without knocking, without a thought for who they might be trampling. I think of all those years, all the meals cooked, the clothes mended, the sleepless nights, all the times I put David's needs, David's happiness, before my own. I gave and gave and gave, because that's what mothers do. That's what love is, isn't it? Selfless. And then, when I was at my most vulnerable, when I thought I was finally able to rest and enjoy my golden years, he looked at me, his mother, and saw only a convenience, a problem solver, a useful, disposable object. He thought I was just an old piece of furniture in the house, something useful, yes, something familiar, but without a voice, without my own will, certainly without any say in my own destiny or his. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other women, how many other elderly people like me are out there feeling this very same thing? People who dedicated their entire lives to caring for others, to raising families, to supporting partners, to building homes. They poured their love, their energy, their very being into nurturing everyone around them. And then, in their old age, when they should be respected, cherished, and enjoying the fruits of their labor, they are often treated as if their value has simply expired, as if they're no longer relevant, as if their wisdom, their experience, their very presence is nothing more than a burden, their opinions dismissed, their needs ignored, their kindness mistaken for weakness. It's a cruel twist, isn't it? To be cast aside by the very ones you built your world for, to be seen as invisible by someone who should have seen you first, seen you clearest. I've lived a long life, seen many things, and I can tell you, there's a quiet epidemic of loneliness and disregard for the elderly. We are not just our wrinkles and our aches. We are not just our past. We are still here. We still have dreams, feelings, a desire to matter. We are still human beings, deserving of dignity and respect, just like anyone else. My journey through this has been painful. Yes, the betrayal cut deep, but it also stripped away the illusions. It forced me to stand up, not just for myself, but for Liam and Chloe. It showed me that true strength isn't about physical power or wealth or even the loudest voice. It's about protecting what's right. It's about recognizing your own worth, even when others try to diminish it. It's about holding on to your dignity, no matter what. And you? Have you ever been treated as if you were invisible by someone who should have seen you first? Have you ever felt that your kindness was mistaken for weakness? Maybe it was a family member, a friend, or even a system that just didn't see you as a person. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but I've learned that sometimes those moments of being underestimated, of being discarded, can be the very catalysts that ignite a fire within you, a fire you never knew you had, a fire to reclaim your life, to stand in your truth, and to protect the innocent. This house, this garden, these children, they are my truth now, and I will protect it all with every fiber of my being. I've learned that love, real love, sometimes means drawing a line, a firm, clear line. Sharing these truths, my truth, feels important to me now. It's how we connect, how we remind each other we're not alone in these struggles. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you're still subscribed to the channel and activate the bell. I truly believe that by